То, що Росія робить, звісно, що не показує, що вони не хочуть миру. Але люди хочуть миру дуже. Мир потрібен, і дуже швидко потрібен, бо з нашої країни нічого не останеться.
Пиздец.
Охуеть, блядь!
Ёперный бабак.
All right, Shalom. I want to start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Monday, January 12th, 2026, Missile Monday. And I have this article from EnglishLPious.com, and it says the Oreshnik ballistic missile almost impossible to intercept and designed by Russia for an atomic war. So I'm just going to go into this article and bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying, straight to the point. And it says the weapon used against Ukraine is capable of firing 6 projectiles with conventional or nuclear warheads. Excuse me. Says the Oreshnik, a medium-range, non-intercontinental ballistic missile that flies at hypersonic speed and is designed for nuclear warfare scenarios, has been deployed again by Russia in its latest offensive against Ukraine. The missile reaches a suborbital altitude and can carry up to 6 warheads, either nuclear or conventional. Its high speed and the very short time frame for attack make it extremely difficult for air defenses to intercept. The Oreshnik is notable for its multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle, or MIRV. Unlike a conventional missile that impacts with a single projectile, the Oreshnik's body fragments in the final phase of its trajectory, releasing multiple warheads that fall simultaneously on the target. Its warheads enter the atmosphere at a higher speed than other, less modern rockets, meaning their impact could destroy underground bunkers simply through the force of the shock without the need for a massive explosion payload. On Thursday night, Russian forces launched the Oreshnik missile along with 35 other missiles and 242 drones against the Lviv province of Ukraine, if I pronounced that correctly, says, which borders Poland. The weapon had previously been used in November 2024 against the Dnipropetrovsk region, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Slovakia, if I didn't, it says it deploys or its deployment violates the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces or INF Treaty, a key agreement to limit nuclear escalation from which the United States and Russia withdrew in 2019. Months ago, Putin explained that this next generation hypersonic missile would be capable of reaching a speed of Mach 10, equivalent to about 12,300 kilometers per hour or 7,643 miles per hour. One of the newest medium-range missiles has been tested under combat conditions. The president stated at the time, however, Western intelligence largely focused on the alliance known as the Five Eyes, which includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, points to a modification of an earlier model. The United States said that the Oreshnik is a modified version of another Russian long-range rocket designed to create an intermediate-range ballistic missile. This IRBM was based on Russia's RS-26 Rubez intercontinental ballistic missile model, said Sabrina Singh, deputy spokeswoman for the U.S. Department of Defense, without providing further details. The use of this type of weapon requires, according to existing arms control agreements between Russia and the United States, that Moscow notify Washington of its launch. The RS-26 Rubez is a solid fuel missile capable of reaching a maximum range of approximately 6,000 kilometers or 3,730 miles. The rocket can carry conventional explosives, nuclear warheads, or avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles. In 2018, when the Russian president unveiled 6 new weapons of mass destruction, 4 years before launching his offensive on Ukraine, Putin warned, not a single country has hypersonic weapons, let alone hypersonic weapons of intercontinental range. EU Representative for Foreign Affairs Kaja Kallas stated on Friday that the Russian bombing of Ukrainian territory the previous night using the Oreshnik missile is a clear escalation against Ukraine and meant as a warning to Europe and to the U.S., and urged that the cost of the war for Moscow be increased with further sanctions against the country. Putin doesn't want peace. Russia's reply to diplomacy is more missiles and destruction. The deadly pattern of recurring major Russian strikes will repeat itself until we help Ukraine break it. The EU's foreign policy chief said in a message posted on her X account. And this is what she said. It says Moscow claims to have fired the Oreshnik missile in response to Kyiv's alleged attack on Putin's residence in the Novgorod region of northern Russia in December. Something Ukrainian authorities called an absurd lie to sabotage peace negotiations. Such a strike close to EU and NATO border is a grave threat to security on the European continent, and a test for the transatlantic community. We demand short responses to Russia's reckless actions. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, said, it says, it is absurd that Russia attempts to justify this strike with a fake Putin residence attack that never happened, he added. And yeah, that video that they put out of his alleged estate being attacked was AI. It was fake. But as you can clearly see, man, Russia's, they're still trying to, take over Ukraine. And for the most part, it's not looking good on Ukraine's end, because again, man, they're not letting up. Putin isn't letting up. And then, I featured, the clips in the beginning of the video, of what's going on over there right now, man, because it's 2026. So I forget exactly the exact month when, Russia first, went to war with Ukraine, but, it's going on 4 years now, because they first took, or this event first took place, 4 years ago in 2022, and this war is still ongoing 4 years later, and they just used this particular missile that they're talking about, which is capable of, as it says, carrying a conventional, rocket or up to 6 nuclear warheads. Excuse me, Slovakia. So, Russia's not playing, man. They're not. And eventually, again, things are going to heat up to a nuclear level. It's not just going to be conventional rockets anymore. Eventually, it's going to be nuclear. So while things are still heating up over there between Russia and Ukraine, man, World War III, is still looming. It's going to happen. But, we still have to wait on prophecies to take place first. The main one being, the mass implementation of the Mark of the Beast, which is the RFID microchip. We're still patiently waiting for that prophecy to come to pass. And then, Jacob's Trouble to fully, come to pass. Because, again, like our Apostle Tahar said, man, we're in Jacob's Trouble right now. But things are just going to get worse. So, I'm just going to read a few scriptures. Again, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. I'm going to start with the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 6. And it says, And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And right, man, we're still seeing wars, and rumors of wars, right? The particular wars that are taking place, Russia and Ukraine, the little hats, versus, Iran, or if not Iran, those, Ishmaelites, the so-called Arabs over there, if not both, of those particular nations, then China and Taiwan, you have these various nations. Slovakia. Excuse me. You have these various nations that are at war with each other right now, right? And then, rumors of war right now. World War III is a rumor. Even though we know what's going to happen, it's still, a cold war that is eventually going to get hot, and it's going to be brought about by way of, Amalek. So let's get that. Let me see, Jeremiah 49. And if it's not 49, it may be 50. Yep. Jeremiah 49 and verse 20. It says, Therefore, hear the counsel of the Lord that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And right, man, the least of the flock, Amalek, the Yamakawiras, as I call them, the Jewish, they're going to do something that is going to cause, Russia and America to be directly at war with each other, because like it says in Ezekiel 38, the various nations that it lists, Russia is going to be a guard unto them, just like the United States, aka Babylon the Great, is a guard unto the state of Israel, and it's going to heat up from there, but again, Amalek, they're going to cause this thing to go, full-fledged, nuclear war. So let's get the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, and verse 16. And it says, Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals and the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster to destroy and right. This is going into, these modern day scientists and physicists that are behind creating and developing these nuclear weapons. A prime example of this would be, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, aka the father of the atomic bomb. He would be a modern day smith, because what does a smith do? A blacksmith is one who makes weapons, and not just any weapons of war, And that's what, these scientists are doing today. They're creating weapons of war, and not just any old weapons of war, weapons of mass destruction. Because again, these missiles that are on the earth today have the capability of destroying the earth. But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever. So the entire planet earth won't be destroyed, but certain lands will. We know for sure that Babylon the Great will be completely destroyed. And the land of Israel will be destroyed, but, it'll be built back up. I personally think, a few other lands may get hit too, but they will be built back up as well. Just me speaking as a man. So let's get the book of Isaiah, still in Isaiah, chapter 9. And verse 5, and it says, For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. Excuse me. And right, man, this is going to be how traditional warfare was fought, with hand-to-hand combat, men having the different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bucklers, bow and arrows, things of that sort, battling each other, on the battlefield, and as I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other, during this Third World War. This particular war is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear missiles, and that's the time that we're in. And it's just going to continue to heat up, because this is here, man. It's here. This thing is going to get gradually worse, but again, we just have to wait for the mark of the beast, to be made mandatory. So let's get the book of Malachi, chapter 4, and verse 1. And it says, For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. And right, man, that's the day that's coming, that's going to burn as an oven, the day of the Lord, World War III, This is what this is going into, man, because once these missiles, launch and then detonate, they're going to burn extremely hot, man, because when you have an oven going, depending on what type, depending on what temperature you put it on, as soon as you open it, that heat hits you, man, because it's very hot. excuse me, Slakia. So let's get that real quick. The book of 2 Peter, chapter 3, and verse 10. And it says, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up." All right, man. Says the day of the Lord is going to come as a thief in the night. So it's going to be unexpected. We don't know the exact day nor hour when this thing is going to take place, but we do know it's going to happen, right? And it says that the heavens, meaning, this current rulership, is going to pass away. And what says the elements, man? Because everything on the earth is an element, especially here in America, there's elements, right? And it says it's going to melt with fervent heat. And it's been brought out that, these missiles are going to burn at 100 million degrees Celsius, man. That's what that word fervent goes into, extreme. So that extreme heat, man, these missiles are literally going to burn hotter than the sun, man. And that's no joke. And this is what we're hoping to escape from, man. This is the Lord's wrath, because our Lord Yahushua is going to come back in the midst of World War III just to finish off Esau, Edom, and the heathen nations, Let's get the book of Revelation, chapter 9, verse 12. It says, "One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter." And right, that first woe being World War I, which took place from 1915 to 1919. That was that first, major world war. I'm going to jump to Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14. It says, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." And right, man, World War II came to pass, from 1939 to 1945, which people thought that was going to be the war to end all wars, especially when Esau, Edom, dropped those atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which 80 years later, the people of Japan still have not forgotten what you have done to them, which, again, they're heathens. We don't care about them, but, still, they haven't forgotten, they have not forgot. But it says, "What the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." And we're seeing the third woe, get ready to come to pass, man, because it is approaching very fast, man. Because again, especially with these moves that, DT is making, he's causing these nations to be angry at America, in which they are, especially after this invasion, of Venezuela, going over there, kidnapping, Maduro, or, just whatever. Because either way it go, that guy's a world leader, so he may be in on it. Because at this point, we pretty much have to question everything, man. But went over there, bombed him to hell and back. Used, sound weapons, which I'm going to do a separate lesson on that, man. Because it's crazy, the account, an individual gave of one of the security guards that were interviewed, when the U.S. invaded Venezuela, and he even stole their oil. But, this is just the time we're in, man. We're in a time of war right now, so things are going to heat up, and things are going to gradually get worse. So I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9, and verse 15. And it says, "And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And right, and when you read the book of Revelation, chapter 7, it mentions the four angels, which these are four little angels, holding the four winds, which the four winds represent the destruction that is going to take place on the earth, and then what here in Revelation 9th chapter, the 15th verse, they're going to be loosed, because there's a set time the Heavenly Father wants this war to take place, is going to play out, in his set time, right? Because there's a particular hour, day, month, and year, when this thing is going to finally happen, and this is to slay the third part of men, because you have three classes of men on the earth today. You have the sons of God, which are the biblical Israelites, the tribe of Judah, all the way down to the tribe of Issachar, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Then you have the sons of men, which are you different heathen nations, which are just over here to make a little money and die. And then you have the sons of the wicked, which is Esau, Edom, you so-called white people. And that's what this destruction is for, is primarily for you, the wicked. But, 2/3 of the nation of Israel are going to get caught up in it. And then you heathen nations that are over here, you're just collateral damage, so you're just over here just to be destroyed if you weren't able to return to your homeland before this war, heats up. Verse 16, and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. So there's going to be 200 million, warheads that are going to pelt this place, because just like it says in the scriptures, the earth is going to reel to and fro like a drunkard, like a drunkard. So the earth is going to be shaken violently, because of all of the warheads that are going to hit this place, And then what the John the Revelator is describing is the very same thing that Joel seen, when you read Joel chapter 2, right? So it's verse 17, Revelation the 9th chapter. It says, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and of brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And right, and it's describing the warheads, man. Because these missiles are made of different types of metals, that breastplate of fire, because again, man, it pretty much described it in the article. These nukes are going to be launched into space. They're going to get their specific trajectory, and then they're going to re-enter, Earth's atmosphere and hit their target, man, because they're going to be on fire. These warheads are going to be on fire because they're going to be traveling extremely fast, just like it said. That's, them having heads like lions, and just like it says, I think it may be in the next verse, but, having the tails like serpents, it's verse 19, them having tails like serpents, it's talking about, that jettison pack, that rocket propulsion system that's going to be guiding these missiles, So verse 18, it says, by these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone, which issue out of their mouths. And right, man, this is how Esau, Edom is going to go out, by way of violence, by being burned up. Verse 19, it says, for their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And right, which I just described, them having the tails like serpents, their rocket propulsion system that is guiding the missiles, because they're going to leave a trail of smoke, because, again, they're being guided. And that's going to be the end of this place, man. And then also, it says, and with them they do hurt, man. It's talking about the warheads because that's the part of the missile that does the damage, you know. So I'm going to end it with this, man, you know, because this is what's coming to America extremely soon, you know, Babylon the Great. And this is going to be the judgment for a lot of people. And we just hope to not be a part of it. This is the book of Zechariah, chapter 14 and verse 12. And it says, and this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem with, their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. All right, and this is given a very, very vivid description of, you know, someone being melted, you know. Says, you know, your flesh is going to consume away, you know, while they stand on their feet. You know, a very, you know, good example of this would be the scene from Terminator 2, you know, when Sarah Connor had that dream where she died, you know, by way of a nuclear explosion, you know, and what, you know, she was burned up. And that's going to be the case for, you know, you Americans, you know, because you're going to be a part of World War III if you want to or not. You know, it's like, you know, we're all going to be a part of it. But the thing is, only a remnant is going to escape, you know, and this is what we hope to be a part of. We hope to be a part of that remnant, you know, that's going to make it out of here. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who are lent this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.